My 7-year-old daughter Gracie stood there holding the microphone at my uncle's 60th birthday party, her small voice cutting cleanly through a crowd of 200 guests. "Uncle Frank, should I play the recording of What You Do to Me at Night?" The champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered against the marble floor. The crack of breaking crystal echoed through the country club ballroom like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. The jazz band's saxophone died mid-note. 200 faces turned toward my little girl in her purple party dress, standing at a microphone stand that was nearly taller than she was. I'm Veronica, and before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand a few things. I'm 32 years old, a single mother, and I work 60 hours a week as a marketing manager just to keep a roof over our heads. My daughter Gracie is 7. She loves unicorns, hates broccoli, and carries her tablet everywhere like a security blanket. She's been my entire world since her father walked out on us last year for his 23-year-old yoga instructor. The man standing frozen in the center of that ballroom, my Uncle Frank, wasn't just family. He was the family patriarch, the success story everyone else was measured against. 60 years old, built like an ex-football player gone slightly soft, with silver hair that cost more to style than I spent on groceries. He owned half the commercial real estate in Phoenix and never let anyone forget it. My mother Darlene stood by the bar in her signature pearls, her face draining of color as she watched her brother. She had worshipped Frank since they were kids, always taking his side, always making excuses. My father Mitchell sat stiffly at their table, staring down at his hands the way he always did when things got uncomfortable. 35 years of marriage, and he had never once stood up to anyone in my mother's family. Aunt Teresa, Frank's wife of 30 years, had been holding court near the chocolate fountain, her diamonds catching the light as she laughed at someone's joke. Now, she stood perfectly still, her champagne glass suspended halfway to her lips, watching her husband like she'd never seen him before. But Gracie just stood there, calm as could be, her little fingers wrapped around the microphone, waiting for an answer. The same little girl who still needed a nightlight, who made me check under her bed for monsters every night, was standing in front of Phoenix's elite, without a trace of fear. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Frank asked. His voice cracked on the last word. He tried to laugh, that booming laugh that usually filled every room he entered, but it came out strangled and wrong. Gracie tilted her head the way she did when she was thinking hard. "You heard me, Uncle Frank. Should I play the recording? You always say honesty is the most important thing in our family. That's what you said in your speech earlier, right before you called my mommy those mean names." I'd been dreading Uncle Frank's 60th birthday party for 3 weeks, ever since the gold-embossed invitation arrived at our apartment. The country club ballroom was exactly what you'd expect from Frank. Crystal chandeliers throwing rainbow patterns across the walls, a live jazz band flown in from New Orleans, and 200 of Phoenix's wealthiest residents pretending they actually enjoyed one another's company. I smoothed down my black cocktail dress, the only one I owned that still fit properly after the stress of the divorce, and held Gracie's hand a little tighter as we walked through the massive oak doors. "Remember what we practiced, baby," I whispered, bending down to adjust the purple bow in her hair. "Just smile, say happy birthday to Uncle Frank, and we can leave right after dinner. 2 hours max, I promise." Gracie nodded solemnly, clutching her small silver purse that held her tablet. She never went anywhere without it anymore. Ever since her father David left us 13 months ago, she'd grown quieter, always recording little videos for what she called her diary, or playing mindless matching games that helped keep her calm. The child therapist said it was her way of processing abandonment, creating a record of her life that couldn't just walk away like her father had. The room buzzed with conversation and polished laughter. My parents stood near the bar, Mom in her pearls Frank had bought her for her 50th birthday, Dad looking profoundly uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. They'd been married 35 years, but you'd never guess they were happy. They looked more like business partners attending a mandatory conference than a couple at a celebration. Veronica? My mother rushed over, heels clicking sharply against the marble, air kissing my cheek to avoid smudging her lipstick. Frank's been asking where you were. You know how he gets when family doesn't show up on time. This is an important night for him. Traffic was terrible, Mom. The lie came as easily as breathing. The truth was, I'd sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel and trying to convince myself to walk in. I'd typed out 3 different excuse texts before deleting them all. Missing Frank's birthday would have caused more drama than attending it. Frank had always been the golden child, the success story everyone else was measured against. Started with nothing after their father died when he was 18, built a real estate empire from a single rental property, married the perfect trophy wife from old Scottsdale money. Every family gathering became a tribute to Frank's brilliance, Frank's generosity, Frank's perfect life. But I knew a different Frank, the one who made my teenage years a special kind of hell with jokes about my developing body, the one who told me I'd never amount to anything like him, the one who turned every family gathering into worship at the altar of his success while quietly tearing everyone else down. "There's my favorite niece," Frank boomed across the room. He was already 3 drinks in. I could see it in the flush spreading across his cheeks and the way he stood just a little too straight, overcompensating for the slight sway in his stance. He strode over, Italian leather shoes clicking against the floor, and pulled me into a hug that lasted 2 seconds too long. His cologne was overwhelming, and his hand lingered on my lower back in a way that made my skin crawl. "Veronica, you look good. Finally lost that baby weight, I see." He laughed at his own joke, even though Gracie was 7. "And little Gracie, how's my prettiest grandniece?" Gracie pressed closer to my leg, mumbling, "Hi, Uncle Frank." Still shy, huh? Just like her mother was at that age. "You grew out of that, didn't you, Ronnie?" He winked, and my stomach turned. I guided Gracie through the crowd toward our table in the back, near the kitchen doors, past the ice sculpture shaped suspiciously like Frank's profile, and the photo displays of his business triumphs. We were there to fill seats, nothing more. I had no idea that in 2 hours, my 7-year-old daughter would destroy Frank's entire world with a single question. The party unfolded normally enough, if anything about one of Frank's celebrations could ever be called normal. Gracie stayed pressed against my side, while I made small talk with cousins I hadn't seen since last Christmas, all of us performing the familiar ritual of pretending we were a close-knit family, rather than strangers who happened to share DNA. My cousin Bethany complimented my dress, while her eyes silently cataloged everything wrong with it. Her husband Roger talked at length about his recent promotion, while sneaking glances at the 20-something waitresses drifting past our table. Gracie sat quietly beside me, tapping on her tablet, recording another video diary entry, or playing one of her calming games. Dinner was served precisely at 7. Salmon that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. Vegetables carved into elaborate flowers that no one actually ate. Frank held court at the head table, regaling his audience with the story of his latest acquisition, a shopping complex he'd bought for pennies on the dollar, from what he cheerfully referred to as motivated sellers, his euphemism for desperate families facing foreclosure. Then came the speeches. Teresa went first, reading from neatly stacked note cards about what a wonderful husband Frank was, how generous, how devoted. My mother followed, tears shimmering in her eyes, as she spoke about her amazing brother who'd stepped up when their father died, who'd become the man of the family at just 18. The words sounded practiced, as if she'd been repeating them for so many years that she truly believed them. Finally, Frank stood, microphone in hand, that familiar smirk spreading across his face, as the room erupted in applause. This was his element, the center of attention, the king surveying his kingdom. "You know," he began, his voice coated in the false warmth he reserved for clients, "turning 60 makes you reflect on family. Family is everything. It's what drives us, what defines us." Some family members lift you up, support your success, celebrate your achievements. He paused, letting the room settle, his eyes sweeping slowly across the crowd before locking onto me with surgical precision. And others, he continued, well, others are just like their mothers, lying women who destroy families. The words hit me like a physical blow. For a heartbeat, the room went dead silent. No one quite sure they'd heard him correctly. Then, nervous laughter rippled through the crowd like a wave. My mother's face flushed red, but she laughed too, that same brittle giggle she always used when Frank went too far. Dad stared down at his plate, suddenly fascinated by the carved radish rows beside his salmon. Take my niece Veronica here, Frank went on, pointing his champagne glass directly at me, liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. 32 years old, couldn't keep a husband, can barely keep a job. And look at that poor kid of hers, always glued to that damn tablet because her mother can't be bothered to actually parent. Too busy feeling sorry for herself to notice her daughter turning into a social reject. Gracie's small hand slid into mine beneath the table, squeezing hard. I could feel her trembling. Frank, that's enough, someone murmured weakly from another table. But Frank was just getting started, fueled by alcohol and the power of knowing no one would truly stop him. Enough? I'm just getting started, he said, taking another long swig of champagne. This is my birthday, and I'll say what everyone else is thinking. You all remember when little Ronnie was 16, made up that whole story about me being inappropriate with her? He made air quotes, his voice dripping with mockery. As if I'd ever look twice at a chunky teenager with braces and acne. The laughter was louder now, uncomfortable, but real. These were Frank's people, his carefully curated audience, laughing because he held their mortgages, owned their office buildings, controlled their financial futures. She was desperate for attention, Frank continued, pacing now like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. Just like her mother was at that age. Right, Darlene? Remember when you used to make up stories about boys liking you? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Generation after generation of women who can't tell the truth if their lives depended on it. My mother nodded along, her smile fixed, her eyes empty. She always was dramatic, she said loudly into her wine glass. Always making things up for attention. The betrayal cut deeper than Frank's words ever could. My own mother, throwing me under the bus again, choosing him again, just like she had when I was 16 and terrified, trying to tell someone, anyone, that Frank kept finding excuses to be alone with me, kept commenting on my body, kept accidentally walking in when I was changing. Tears burned hot down my cheeks. I stood up, pulling Gracie with me, ready to leave. But Frank wasn't finished. Oh, don't go running off like you always do, Ronnie, he sneered. Just like when you were a teenager. Can't face the truth about yourself? This is what's wrong with your generation. No accountability, always the victim, never taking responsibility for your failures. That was when Gracie pulled her hand from mine. Before I could stop her, she stepped away from the table and began walking toward the microphone stand. She moved through the crowd with a determination I had never seen in her before. Her purple party dress swished around her knees, her little patent leather shoes clicking against the marble floor with each purposeful step. The band stopped playing, confused by this tiny interruption. Gracie reached the microphone stand, which towered over her small frame, and rose onto her tiptoes to reach it. "Excuse me?" Her small voice rang out through the speakers, clear as a bell. "Uncle Frank." 200 faces turned toward my 7-year-old daughter, standing alone at the front of the ballroom. Frank chuckled, that familiar condescending laugh reserved for people he believed were beneath him. "Well, look at this," he announced. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. What kind of attention-seeking drama is this? Did Mommy tell you to come up here, sweetheart?" Gracie shook her head slowly. "No, Uncle Frank. Mommy doesn't know I'm doing this. But you said my mommy tells lies, and that's not true. I don't lie. Lying is bad. My mommy taught me that.
Of course it is, sweetheart, Frank said, his voice coated in fake kindness as he started walking toward her. Why don't you go back to your mother now? The adults are talking.
But you lie, Gracie said simply, her voice steady in a way that felt impossible for a 7-year-old facing a room full of adults. You lied about being at a business meeting last Tuesday. You were in Mommy's room when she was at work. I saw you. The room fell completely silent. Teresa's smile faltered, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Frank's expression shifted from amused to something darker, something sharp. Kids say the darndest things, Frank said, forcing a laugh no one joined. Veronica probably coached her. Another desperate attempt for attention. I have a recording, Gracie said, pulling her tablet from her small silver purse. The tablet looked enormous in Gracie's small hands as she held it up for everyone to see. I record everything for my video diary, she said calmly. My therapist says it helps to keep track of my feelings and what happens each day. Like when you came to our house last week when Mommy was at work. My blood turned to ice. Frank had been in my apartment? We'd changed the locks after David left, but Frank had helped us move in. Had he made a copy of the key? The thought made my stomach lurch. You used a key to get in, Gracie continued. You said you were checking on us, but you went into Mommy's room and stayed there for a long time. This is ridiculous, Frank snapped, though the confidence had drained from his voice. I've never been to your apartment without your mother knowing. That's another lie, Gracie replied matter-of-factly. You've been there lots of times, 17 times in the last 3 months. I counted. You always come between 10 and noon on Tuesdays and Thursdays, when Mommy is at her big meetings. Sometimes you stay for an hour. Teresa shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Frank, she demanded, what is she talking about? She's confused, Frank said quickly. She probably saw a maintenance man or someone else and got mixed up. Gracie shook her head. I'm not confused. You said mean things about Aunt Teresa when you were in Mommy's room. You said she was stupid and boring, and you did weird things with Mommy's clothes, taking pictures, smelling them. You went through her dresser drawers and took something. I couldn't see what because I was hiding in the hallway, but you put it in your pocket. The silence was deafening. 200 people sat frozen as my 7-year-old dismantled Frank's carefully constructed image with the precision of a surgeon. Should I play the recording? Gracie asked, her finger hovering over the tablet screen. You always say evidence is important, Uncle Frank. That's what you said when you were on the phone with your lawyer last month about that lawsuit. You said evidence is everything. Frank started toward her, moving faster now, his face flushing a dark, angry red. Give me that tablet right now, young lady. I jumped up, every maternal instinct screaming. But before I could reach her, my father stood. My quiet, passive father, who had never stood up to anyone in 35 years, was suddenly on his feet. Don't you take another step toward that little girl, Frank, Dad said. His voice was low and dangerous, a sound I had never heard from him before. Frank froze, his gaze darting around the room. His audience, people who owed him money, favors, or both, was watching him differently now. Admiration had been replaced with suspicion. Play it, Teresa said, her voice slicing through the silence. Play the recording, Gracie. Gracie tapped the screen with the ease of a child raised on technology and lifted the microphone toward her tablet. Frank's voice filled the ballroom, crystal clear through the expensive sound system he had insisted on for his party. Stupid Teresa thinks I'm at a meeting with the Riverside Development Group. She actually believes I spend 3 hours every Tuesday looking at blueprints. God, she's gotten so boring. 20 pounds heavier than when we married, talks about nothing but her book club and Pilates classes. I come here when Veronica's at work sometimes, just to remember what it's like to want something you can't have. There was a rustling sound, fabric shifting. This is Veronica's bed. She sleeps on the left side, even though she's alone now. Still can't break the habit from when that loser David was around. These are her sheets, that silky purple set. They smell like her, like that vanilla perfume she wears. The same perfume Darlene wore when we were teenagers, before she married that useless Mitchell. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The recording continued, Frank's real voice growing louder, more frantic. "That's enough. Turn it off." But Gracie stepped back, keeping the microphone close as his recorded voice went on. "Darlene should have been mine. I saw her first, loved her first. But she chose Mitchell because our parents said it would be weird, us being siblings and all. But I knew we weren't really siblings, not by blood. Mom had that affair, everyone knew it. I wasn't Dad's real son. We could have been together." A collective gasp rippled through the room. "And Veronica," the recording continued. "God, Veronica looks just like Darlene did at 32. Sometimes when I'm standing in this room going through her things, I pretend she's Darlene, that I got the life I was supposed to have." The sound of drawers opening echoed through the speakers. "These are her underwear, the nice ones she doesn't wear anymore since David left. This black lace pair. I'm taking these. She'll never notice. Just like she never noticed I kept her spare key from when I helped her move in. Stupid woman, trusting me like that. Though she wasn't so stupid when she was 16. She knew what I wanted then. Tried to tell people, but nobody believed her. Dramatic little Veronica, making up stories. If only they knew how many nights I've stood in her doorway while she slept. She's so beautiful when she's unconscious. When she can't look at me with those judging eyes," Teresa screamed. She grabbed a full bottle of champagne from the nearest table and hurled it at Frank, missing his head by inches as it shattered against the wall behind him. "You sick bastard," she screamed. "You've been stalking your own niece, stealing her underwear." But the recording wasn't finished. Frank's voice grew darker, more unhinged with every word. 17 times now. Each time, I get a little braver. Last week, I touched her pillow, put my face where hers goes. Next time, maybe I'll be here when she gets home. Maybe there'll be an emergency, a reason I had to be here. Maybe she'll be grateful, vulnerable. Maybe she'll finally see I'm the one who really loves her. Not like that pathetic David, the recording continued. Not like any of those losers she dates. I've loved her since she was born, watched her grow up, watched her become exactly what I knew she would be, mine. She was always supposed to be mine. The recording stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, thick and suffocating, broken only by Teresa's sobbing and the slow drip of champagne sliding down the wall. Frank lunged for Gracie, his face purple with rage, but he didn't make it 2 steps. My father, my quiet, passive father, tackled him to the ground with a force that sent both of them skidding across the polished marble floor. Dad pulled back his fist and punched Frank square in the jaw. Then again, and again. "My daughter!" Dad shouted, his voice cracking with rage and grief. "You sick piece of garbage! She was a child! She came to us for help, and we didn't believe her! And you've been in her home, touching her things! You perverted monster!" Security rushed in, dragging Dad off Frank. But the damage was already done. Frank's nose was broken, blood pouring down his face and soaking into his expensive tuxedo. But worse than the physical injuries was the way everyone was looking at him now, faces twisted in disgust, horror, and revulsion. "There are more recordings," Gracie said calmly, as if she hadn't just destroyed a man's entire life. 3 of them, from all the times he came over. Sometimes he stayed for 2 hours. Sometimes he took things. Mommy's hairbrush once, a picture of her from the fridge, her favorite coffee mug. She paused. "Should I play more?" "No, baby." I managed through my tears as I dropped to my knees and pulled her into my arms. "No more. You did so good. You did so good, my brave girl." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone had called 911. Frank tried to stand, but 3 of his own security guards held him down, their expressions grim. Even they couldn't stomach what they'd heard. The police arrested Frank that night in front of everyone. They didn't let him clean the blood from his face or straighten his torn tuxedo. He was handcuffed right there on the marble floor of his own birthday party, read his rights while 200 members of Phoenix's elite watched, and recorded on their phones. By morning, the videos were everywhere. Local news picked it up by noon. Within a week, Frank's real estate empire began to crumble as investors pulled out and banks called in loans. The recordings Gracie had made were turned over to the police as evidence, all 43 of them, documenting 3 months of Frank entering my home without permission. She'd started recording after coming home sick from school one day and seeing Frank leaving our apartment. At 7 years old, she knew something was wrong but didn't know how to explain it. So she did what she'd been doing since the divorce. She documented everything. During the search of Frank's home, police found the camera he'd installed in my bedroom vent, hidden but not yet activated. They told me the pattern of escalation was clear. He'd been building towards something worse. They also found a box in Frank's home office filled with items taken from my apartment. Things I hadn't even realized were missing. My hairbrush, a pillowcase, 3 pairs of underwear, photos of me taken without my knowledge, some from inside my home while I slept. After news of his arrest spread, 3 other women came forward. My cousin Patricia from Tucson, who'd suddenly moved away 10 years earlier. My dad's cousin Rebecca, who had cut all contact with the family 5 years back. Frank's former secretary, who'd quit abruptly 15 years ago. Every one of them had a story. Every one of them had tried to tell someone. None of them had been believed. My mother came to my apartment the next morning, looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her makeup was gone, her eyes swollen and red. She stood in my doorway like she wasn't sure she deserved to come in. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "When you were 16 and tried to tell me about Frank, I knew. Part of me knew you were telling the truth. But believing you meant admitting I'd failed to protect you. It meant admitting my brother was a monster. It was easier to call you a liar than face that." "Why didn't you protect me?" I asked through tears. "Because I was a coward," she said. "Because Frank controlled everything, the money, the decisions, after Dad died. I chose my comfort over my daughter's safety. There's no excuse." I didn't forgive her that day, or the next. But over months of therapy, separately and together, we began to rebuild something. Not what we had before, but something more honest. Teresa divorced Frank immediately and testified against him at trial. She admitted she'd suspected affairs, but never imagined this. She told me about signs she'd ignored, his fixation on family photos of me, his constant need to know where I was, the way he said my name in his sleep. She turned over their home security footage, showing Frank watching videos of me late at night, zooming in on photos for hours. My father became the man he should have been all along. He testified against Frank, calling him a predator who hid behind money and family loyalty. He moved out for a month, saying he needed to understand how he'd become someone who didn't protect his own child. When he came back, he was different, stronger. He started therapy and joined a support group for families of abuse survivors. Frank was sentenced to 15 years. The judge said the recordings revealed a deeply disturbed pattern of escalation that likely prevented a violent assault. His lawyer tried to suppress Gracie's recordings, arguing they were made illegally by a minor, but the judge ruled that a child protecting her mother in her own home had every right to record an intruder. At Gracie's 8th birthday party 6 months later, a small gathering of our rebuilt family and her therapist, she stood up with a microphone again. "Thank you for coming to my party," she said. "And thank you for believing kids when they tell the truth. Sometimes the smallest voices say the biggest things. My mommy says I'm brave, but I was just doing what she taught me, telling the truth and protecting the people we love." My mother cried. My father held her hand. And I realized that sometimes it takes a child's courage to shatter the silence that protects monsters. Frank's real estate empire was liquidated to pay settlements to his victims. The country club banned our entire family after that night. It was the best gift Frank ever gave us. freedom from pretending everything was perfect when it never was. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. If this resonated with you, if you've ever been dismissed or not believed, know that your truth matters. Like this video if it touched you. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage and survival. Your story deserves to be heard too. Comment below if you've ever had to stand up to someone everyone else protected.